Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope all of you are doing great. So a lot of questions regarding the Nokia G60 5G and the Nokia X30 5G. So I'm going to make another video to share with you the similarities and differences between both these devices. So this is the Nokia G60 5G and this is the Nokia X30 5G. Now in the past it is more easier for me to recommend one over the other. Just pick the more expensive one and you get a better experience. But for the first time, I think for the first time in probably this includes many other manufacturers. Now we've got a mid-range device which is slightly cheaper but has its own added advantage which might entice buyer to choose one over the other. So with that said, I'm going to share with you some similarities and differences between both these devices. See at the end of the video whether you pick one over the other or would you just get both of them, because this is quite confusing. Now with that said, for those of you who are new, do consider subscribing to my channel. My contents are slightly different in a way that this is from an end user point of view, not a sponsored content. This is my personal purchase of the device, so my contents and my reviews are of my own, considering the fact that I have to import these devices, which most of you might share the same situation. So I do take into account factors like additional pricing when it comes to importing devices, the hassles of claiming warranty and whatnot, before I actually give my verdict on the device. So with that said, let's have a look at the Nokia G60 5G and the Nokia X30 5G. So this is the Nokia X30 5G, this is the Nokia G60 5G. In hand, both devices feel great despite being made from recycled materials, and you can already see some of the differences here. The G60 5G is slightly taller and has a slightly thicker profile by just a couple of millimeters. But one thing obvious is that the camera island is slightly more protruding on the X30 5G. Now some other differences you will see is that on the top you've got, I believe this is two microphones on the X30 5G, a single microphone on the G60. On the bottom you've got an additional microphone here on the X30, an additional microphone on the G60. You've got a 3.5mm head jack which is missing on the X30. The SIM slot is at the bottom. You've got a bottom firing speaker on both with the USB-C charging port. Now this is the right hand side of the device. You can see the volume rock and power button, but the power button on the G60 houses the fingerprint scanner. The fingerprint scanner is available under display on the X30. No Google Now button on each of these devices, but you do have the SIM slot on the left side for the G60. So this has three microphones compared to the ones on the G60 which has two. If you follow GSM Arena's spec configuration, apparently the X30 also has an IR blaster which I couldn't identify. If any one of you know where it is, to let me know in the comment section. Now this has an optical image stabilized camera. This does not, though both having a 50 megapixel sensor, but the 50 megapixel sensor on the X30 5G belongs to a much more premium device. People say that this belongs to the same camera module as the one in S22, Galaxy S22 that is. So this does not have a 2 megapixel depth camera compared to the ones on the G60 5G. Most of the depth is through software based on the X30. In terms of ultra-wide, this has a 5 megapixel camera compared to a 30 megapixel ultra-wide camera. The lack of OIS on the G60 5G is something to be tested out on a later video, whether or not it does the OIS give any advantage to the X30 in terms of the exposure time, a much better night output, or a much better stabilized video. So that was a separate video I will be making. Now both actually feels really good in the hand despite being made of recycled material. So I'm just going to show you that both these devices are at big brightness now, and you can already see that the brightness on the X30 is much more than the Nokia G60 5G. Now before I go into that, I'm just going to show you the fingerprint scanner and how responsive it is. On the G60 5G, it's just through the power button. On the X30, you can just double tap it and use this. So the under display fingerprint scanner is the best I've experienced coming from Nokia 9 PoView, which was so cumbersome, so difficult, and was one of the reasons the Nokia 9 PoView had a very poor rating when it comes to the Nokia fans out there. So this sort of redeems that by having a much better, much reliable, much faster fingerprint scanner. Now this is an IPS display, this is an OLED display. This has 120 Hz, this has 90 Hz, Gorilla Glass 5 protection, Gorilla Glass Victus protection. This has a splash proof resistant. I believe this is IP67 resistant. Now the differences are not as easy as it is. In paper, in theory, the X35G's display should trump the G65G's display, but this is not the case. I've made a separate video to highlight how good the display is on the G65G, where it can even rival a pure display device like the Nokia X30 and even the Nokia 7.2. Now you can see the differences here. Both devices are at peak brightness. For those of you who are unaware, this is sort of like a snack in India. There's a very large chili, a very long and large chili which is fried in a deep batter, and it's not spicy though, but you can see how much the differences are. The colors on the X30 and the colors on the G65G, there are some subtle differences. The G65G has a more vibrant output. I'm going to show you a separate image here. So this is a carrot, and this is it. Let's find some same frame. Here you go. So you can see that the colors on the X30 when it comes to the leaf might be very subtle, but you can see the differences. Nevertheless, even the carrot, you can see that is slightly more vibrant. Now we are not comparing OLED to OLED. This is a comparison between an IPS and OLED, where we know that an OLED display should have the more vibrant color. What I'm trying to highlight is that the display on the Nokia G65G is tuned in a way that it can even rival more expensive devices, and this is one of the best things that have happened in any Nokia device in recent times, where the cheaper device is actually having an equal or better experience in terms of the visual experience when it comes to a mobile device. So really good work has been done by HMD Global. Now there are some other images I would share. Let's see, we could show another image. Okay, let's go to this. Are these the same? Yep, both of these are the same images. What can you see? Here, colors are much more vibrant compared to the one on the X30. Now these are really subtle changes but perceivable. If it's an OLED to OLED comparison, it is something that we can brush it off, but when it comes to an IPS to an OLED, it is something that really need to be shared. So other than that, of course, the OLED has a much blacker, deeper black compared to the IPS display, but the ones on the Nokia G65G is pretty good enough. And of course, being an OLED display, it has this always on display information, which is lacking on the Nokia G65G. Now when it comes to the speaker, the X35G has a louder speaker. The G65G has probably an adequate speaker in that sense. Yes, it is loud, but it's not as loud as the one on the X30. But the X30 feels or sounds more hollow in that sense compared to the G65G, which has some better clarity in that sense. So not really nitpicking, I would still rate the speaker of the Nokia X30 as the best speaker on a Nokia device. So compare that to the Nokia X30. The X30 is loud but hollow. G60 is slightly less loud but has more clarity, so that is depending on individual preference. Now the X30 comes with two configurations, 128 and 256. The G60 has also two configurations. At 128 GB you can have the 4 GB edition or the 6 GB edition. Taiwan unit has a 6 GB edition. This has an expandable memory, this does not. So it all boils down to personal preference. I would rather have a 256 GB edition or go for the G65G, which has an expandable storage. Now in terms of the battery life, both have fantastic battery life. This does have a faster charging speed capacity at 33 watts. This is at 20 watts, but the battery life on the G65G is slightly better in that sense. Both would easily last you a day, but the G65G should last slightly longer. Now With that said, it is not an easy differentiating factor. So both devices are actually quite good despite being in a separate price category altogether. You can see the differences between both these devices might not be as much as you would expect, and somehow HMD Global has managed to tune the Nokia G60 to perform almost as good as a more expensive device here. So this is what is important. So as always, it all boils down to camera performances, and I will be making a detailed video on the camera performances. I think this is one of the more important differences that need to be noted, because both these cameras actually running on a very similar software, so they do offer same software experience. And we would now know or know how much the software input is in the final outcome of the image, because the sensors used are different now. And having an optical image stabilization on the X35G might have some additional benefit on its own, or maybe not. So that is for us to find out. So that's all for now. I do hope you enjoyed this simple comparison video. If you like the content, do consider subscribing. It will help me to make more videos like this, and there will definitely be more comparison videos when it comes to camera performances. So do stay tuned. I hope all of you stay well and take care.